Alrighty then. We're going to start a countdown from 5 and then actually begin the podcast. 5, 4, 3. Hey there. This is Johnny with glasses on. I have to use these, did I call them cheaters? I started using them a few years ago, just to bring things a little closer when I read. And you don't probably see these with me on, but then it reminded me just 3 minutes ago, when I was 9 years old, I had major eye surgery on my eyes because of some problems. And before that, I used to wear these really kind of a thick glasses. So if you can imagine my 9 and 8 and 9 and 10-year-old self wearing these kind of thick glasses, then you see me as I truly am. Today's podcast is, after thoughtfully trying to figure out a name for it, I've come up with this, and this is what I'm going to call it. Chewing the Fat with Charles Darwin on Galapagos, on the Galapagos Islands, from about 3 years ago when I was there. Okay. Here's what I want to first say about that. I've got some note cards. I don't like to refer to them very often, but sometimes I think with self-discipline wise and making sure I stay on track to keep it within about a 30-minute range, I'm doing that some, okay? Galapagos Islands belongs to the country of Ecuador. And you know where Ecuador is, right there on the coast of South America, on the western side, you know, in between Colombia and Peru, and touches up there, I think, with something of Brazil. Something like that. Maybe it doesn't touch Brazil right there. Anyway, I took off down there a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago, something like that. And actually, yes, it was in November, 3 years ago, 2017, with no plan except to fly into Ecuador and then take 6 months and just start wandering through different places in South America. And that's what I did. And it was quite marvelous, to say the least. So one of my first stops was in Ecuador, was to see Ecuador on the mainland and to catch a flight out to the Galapagos Islands, you know, and see where a lot of stuff happened in the life of Charles Darwin. Setting for Galapagos is it's a weirdly wonderful place. All kinds of strange things there. You know, I got the giant tortoises that I was just like, whoa! And then you've got these all these different species of birds. One of the most fascinating things that I happened upon and wandering around was something called the what's it called? The marine iguana. And they were on this beach, and all of it's a volcanic island, by the way. It's, you know, made from volcanoes. And there was these weird creatures. I thought there was iguanas, but they were, you know, they looked a little different. They were much darker in color for the most part. Right there on the ocean, in the rocks. And then I saw them coming out of the ocean and going into the ocean and swimming. And I thought, oh, iguanas that swim and do a little feeding and hunting in the ocean. You can imagine Charles Darwin going, oh dear. And what else? It's called the blue-footed booby. Don't you like saying that? Yeah, what is that over there? It's a blue-footed booby. So, you know, any high school student or junior high student would just love to say that over and over again as a former high school teacher. Anyway, sea lions, all this wonderful stuff. It's a fascinating place to visit, absolutely. And I hope you get to go. So while there, of course, I started thinking again about growing up in public schools in the science classroom. And remember that poster that's in all the science classrooms, at least it was in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And I guess, I don't know if they're still doing that. I don't know. But it had, man. And it started off with something out of the sea, and then as it progresses on the folder, on the poster, this comes out, and they get up and rise up and rise up, and pretty soon you got from something crawling out of the sea up into the walking human man as we are today. You know what I'm talking about. And I always used to stare at that, go, wow. Anyway, on Galapagos, I thought about Charles Darwin, who, by the way, now this guy came from money, so I just want you to understand that. No judgment in that. I'm just saying he came from money, came obviously well educated. Something interesting that I just want to throw out there really quickly to you is that his grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, wrote a book called Zoonomia back in 1790s, something. And in this book, he reiterated from things that he believed that there was a common descent of mankind. Common descent of mankind. He even wrote, it was like a poetic fantasy to some degree, and emphasized points of natural theology, which is like deism. And I don't mean to just, like I'm just throwing out these terms and without a context. I don't mean to do that. I don't like to do that. Anyway, he believed almost like a deist would believe, which is that we can understand or notice or figure out God or who God is, or at least belief in God. It's called natural theology, deism, just by observing the facts of nature. But we do not include any kind of divine revelation. That's deism. So you look at nature and you just say, there's a house, but we don't say, well, there's a designer of the house. We just say, let's look at the house and just figure out from the house what's going on in this situation. A little bit lacking, but that's something to throw out there. To say that the originality of Darwin's theory of evolution wasn't as original as you might make it out to be. He was actually reared in an environment where his uncle was already giving him ideas that he later used. So, with that said, that's kind of like a little weird introduction. Now it's going to go to story time. I'm weird, and you didn't know that, but now you do. In that, I like to use, literary constructs and literary things when I do something, whether it's kind of a little bit of writing or when I speak. And so one of my favorite things to do, and I know that you're just very familiar with this won't be anything new to you, and you probably do it. And it's called personification. And so in personification, it's like I'm giving life to an inanimate object or a thing or something that is not alive, or is that it's indifferent to the environment, and I give it some kind of life. So, in this instance, while I was on Galapagos, and I know that you never have done this in your life, I took a walk. It was a long walk, and I walked over to the Charles Darwin Research Station, which is a big facility there on Galapagos. So I walked through the facility, looked around, did this and that, and noticed their displays and things out, and was very interested, and just did that thing, and love that kind of stuff. I just love that kind of stuff. Just anything that about life and about people discussing what they believe are the origins of life, and what they giving their theories on things, and what they establish as their criteria for that, and all that stuff. So, looking around, I'm walking. There's a few people there. There's a few nationalities there, but it's not a busy place on that particular afternoon. Remember, I'm right on the equator. This is where we're talking about Ecuador, and we're talking about the Galapagos Islands, right on the equator. In fact, you can see the line. And so I'm walking around. It's kind of a beautiful afternoon. So I go down a certain path. I turn a corner, and I go by a building, and I see this other little path. And so I say, I'm going to take that path. So I take that path, and that's what I do. I do stuff like that. I'm going to wonder where this leads. Wonder if I'm supposed to be around here. I go, oh yeah. I see this little rotunda building, this little building that's kind of got three or four steps up, and just open-sided. So you go up and you're on a platform like you're in a park, you know, and they have a little platform with the roof covering with open sides. So I walked up the steps. I looked around. I thought, this is really pretty cool out here, kind of in the jungle-y a little bit, and looking at the ocean out that way, and some trees around. It's real quiet. Hear a few birds chirping and going on. I don't hear people talking. I don't hear anyone. So, of course, I sat down on the bench, and when I walked up, of course, I noticed that there was someone else in the room with me. And that someone else was the man himself, Mr. Charles Darwin. So across, and it's not a very big place, so across from me were some benches, and sitting on one of the benches was a life-size statue of Charles Darwin. And he was sitting there, I believe his legs were crossed. By the way, maybe I'll just put up that picture on the green screen behind me, if I can remember. And maybe if I move away, maybe you can see the picture of Charles Darwin. We'll see. Let's see if that works. That was very spur of the moment. Don't you just love it? And so what I lost my train of thought. No, I didn't. And so what I want to say is, he was sitting across from me. And I sat there. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just kind of looking around, feeling the situation, wondering about the situation. And so I thought, okay, all these years, all these conversations, I've had a lot of conversation with Darwinists, with evolutionists, most of them civil. I always try to be civil. And I think most of the ones that I've talked to have tried to be civil. A couple times, some folks got very excited. It's a story that I'll tell you from. It happened in Phnom Penh in Cambodia. Whew, 3 Australian guys just got really excited. I wasn't even talking to them. Just didn't like what I was saying to someone else who asked me a question. So we had to deal with that. Anyway, I was sitting there, and I looked at the statue of Charles Darwin, and he had I think a book, I'm trying to remember, and sitting there, and suddenly I just had to speak to him. Mind you, there was no one else around, no one. I didn't hear anyone. So instead of speaking a conversation or a question in my mind, I decided to speak out loud. And I said something along the lines of, I remember fairly well this conversation, pretty well. It was only 3 years ago, and I am an older guy, but I can remember stuff. And so I said something like, hey, Charles, how are you doing today? I've studied and thought about your theory for a long time. Not so much now. I've settled a lot of the questions in my mind, studied them out, thought about them, reflected upon them, and tested them. as you know, the scientific process causes us to do. And I said, I must say that I find it lacking, and I want to ask you a question. I felt no animosity. I felt like he was listening to me. I felt no judgment for him. Really, truly. And I said, Charles, something's been on my mind that I've been thinking about for a couple of decades now because of my travels. I said, this question has to do with something out of Anthropology 101. I remember saying that. And so he didn't object at all at this point to any of my questions. So I have a lozenge in my mouth, so because of my throat. He was very, open at the moment. And I said, I said, in all my travels and in all my readings and study from ancient times, ancient societies, anthropology is the study of ancient cultures and human societies and how they functioned all the way back as far as people can go back and find where they've lived. That's anthropology, basically. And so I said, in all of these thousands of indigenous tribal groups around the world, everywhere around the world, from as far back as we can go back and look at villages and rock formations and writings on walls and collecting from under the earth reminiscences of human civilization, that there is a consistent pattern from all of these different, unrelated, didn't know each other, different times, different tribal groups, different parts of the world, that consistently each of these groups reasoned out that there was a creator, a designer, if you will, a provider for the things around them, if you will. They even reasoned out from looking at the cycle of life that there was death, life, and then rebirth. They reasoned out that there was an afterlife from nature, from the consistency of nature. So I said, Charles, what about that? Using the scientific principles that you adhere to, you have a problem, you have a situation, and you want to address it. So you create a hypothesis. You test the hypothesis. You continue to test it, right? Adjust to it. Why is it that even without any divine revelation, that the human nature, that human experience, that the human being reasons out consistently in unrelated situations that God is, that a creator is, that a maker is? And it shows in their lifestyle and everything about them, consistently throughout history. You don't have anyone, Charles, that reasoned out an evolutionary process, as you say, from something happening in the sands in the sea of time and the mesh of time, and then growing into what the diversity and to the tremendous complexity of life. Life just happened. You don't have that. And I know that you appeal to reason as the Enlightenment fathers that you love so much do, you know. So, that's just something that came to me, and I felt like I needed to ask Charles, and I did. I was very relaxed, probably not. I probably asked him with not as much passion as I just related it, but I did say all those things out loud, or near enough those things out loud, because I wanted him to understand, and I wanted to verbalize it. And I said, "What have you got to say about that?" I remember. So, "What have you got to say about that, Charles?" And I said, "Cat got your tongue?" And I started laughing. I swear that maybe he smiled. I don't know. Maybe it was just a reflection of the sunlight in the background. And so we went on from there. And I thought, well, I guess I needed to say that. So I did. Now, oh, and to close it all off, I said, Charles, you are out there somewhere. I know that. And I don't know where you are. And I don't know how it's exactly going to happen after you went on, your spirit. I make no judgment. But I know you've met some folks, you've met some people, and you have a much broader understanding of realities now. And I say that without judgment. Truly. It's not up to me. I want grace for everyone, as you do too. I heard some voices, and then heard some voices kind of far away, so I sat back and I thought, you know what, I'm not going to say any more out loud, so I shut down. Because obviously, I didn't want anybody to think I was crazy, because we wouldn't want that, would we? I mean, a person talking to a statue and having a conversation, laughing, questioning, waiting for a response. I mean, who would do that? Surely not you. Because you're sane, aren't you? You wouldn't do that. And I bet if I was to ask and you got a chance to, and you were free to do that, I bet a bunch of you are as crazy as I am. How about that? Huh. I don't mean to make fun of anybody. I'm not, certainly in this situation, I am not making fun of Charles Darwin. I'm not making fun of the evolutionary process. Classical evolution. Not within the species. Classical evolution, just so you know, I know what I'm talking about. All right. Between the species. And so, as with anything, we just try to ferret out and try to live our lives according to finding a truthful path and seeking a truthful answer, both with our observation and our experience and using scientific method, and aside from the limited fallacy of natural theology or deism, that there really is a very real case for divine revelation. But that's another discussion another time. It's really weird because I picture when I'm talking to the camera, as I am, I do picture people's faces when I do that. I imagine a person's face that maybe reminds me of the subject matter. And so people's faces flash in and out. So I do that when I'm talking to the camera, thinking that I'm talking to a person. Is that another? That's not personification, because I'm not expecting. What do I even do this? What I just did to stop that. Stop. Okay. Moving on. Isn't life wonderful? And here's why. To end these thoughts, a couple of nights ago I was thinking about, what are we going to talk about Galapagos and about Charles Darwin. And it was late and I'd gone to bed, and because I'm 66, sometimes I have to get up a couple of times in the night, to run around the block or use the bathroom. And so Um, I did that, and sometimes I'm unable to fall right back to sleep. Imagine that. So I don't despair in that. I don't get upset with that. I just sort of drift in and out for a while, thinking and wondering about things and laughing at old private memories and doing some praying, asking the Maker and the Gracious One, always like, thank you. And suddenly this movie flashed through my head. Okay, so to end this, here's the movie. The setting is the late 70s. I'm on the road, very late 70s. I'm on the road. I'm in Istanbul, Turkey. I am with 2 or 3 friends. I'm trying to remember. I know 1, 2. I don't remember if there's a 4th person there. And we spontaneously, I think there was 4 of us, we spontaneously decide to go to the movies because we're walking over by Taksim Square in Istanbul, and we look up and we see a movie logo, and it's got Star Trek, the movie, or something like that. I think it's like Star Trek, the motion picture, or the movie. So we go, Star Trek. Of course, I love Star Trek. And so we're like, hey, let's go to the movie. So we went to a pastry shop, waited till the movie started, noticed that it was in English with Turkish subtitles. So we went to see the very first Star Trek movie, the very first one ever made, Star Trek movie. All right? So this is after the series, and this is before the next generation. So we go and we watch the movie. Now, okay, the movie concerns that there's this giant threat coming towards Earth, this spaceship. And it's coming, so the Enterprise goes out to intercept it and see what's going on, and it's just too powerful. They can't stop it. And it even communicates with them as it's coming back to Earth. And it's just full of all these gadgets, and it's powerful, and they try to stop it, whatever, with the phasers and all that, and nothing even dents it. And so this entity decides to communicate. And the entity they're coming to Earth, and they notice that on this, it's all built up and it's giant, but somehow they notice that there's some words on the side of this entity. And there's letters, and they see the letter V. And they see blackness and scratchings and markings. And then they see down further on a G and an E and an R. And they're like, what? So this is in the 23rd century. So here's what happened. In the 1970s, 300 years before this takes place in the movie, we sent out Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 in the 1970s. You know they're still out there right today, and they send back things. They're about, they estimate about 80 billion miles out there in space. So here's what happened. To relate to our discussion today is apparently Voyager 1 took off, deep space, or is it Voyager 2? I don't know which one. Both of them took off into deep space. Got 300 years later, over that 300-year period, this Voyager 1 that takes pictures, monitors what's going on, beep, 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 see if it can find any sounds, changed. It evolved. It grew a personality. It evolved into this giant spaceship that was intelligently designed further out from this small spaceship into this monstrosity of power. And at some point, this intelligent life that came into this spaceship from somehow just appeared over these few hundred years and grew into this intelligent life form decided to come back to the earth. For what purpose? Its purpose stated to the Enterprise was, I will come back because I want to join with my Maker. I want to join with my Maker. So here's the situation. You see where this is going? Come on. See where this is going? So comes back, and they're like, we can't stop it. What does it mean, join with its Maker? What does it mean? And so it was building in power, and it had the power to destroy the earth. And it was getting frustrated, angry, because it couldn't find the Maker. One of the lieutenants, that bald head woman, Kambata somebody, I think she died a few years ago. I think she looked Indian, had an Indian look, and she was bald headed, quite beautiful, I always thought. And she, lieutenant, like a science officer, a lieutenant, finally she says, I know what to do. And she says, I think I understand what's going on here. We are the Maker. It's us. Because what did they figure out? They wiped it away or whatever they did, and it said G-E-R, Voyager. And they went, Voyager? Wasn't that an old spaceship back from 300 years ago? And they go, let's look it up. Sure enough. So the creator, men, made Voyager, sent it out into space. It developed its own life, its own evolving, and it evolved. And what was its nature to do? Like every other indigenous nature, tribal nature, and tribal group from the beginning of civilized or uncivilized humanity that we can see in anthropology, they all said somehow they're trying to figure out who the Maker is. Really, historically, anthropologically. Trying to figure it out, trying to attach meaning to it, trying to find identity through that. So, she says, we are the Maker. It wants to join with the Maker. So she says, I'll do it. So she goes on to the ship itself. She stands back, and the ship slowly envelops her with wires and stuff and circuits and things, and she becomes a human that joined with what she made and sent out into space, or what man made and sent out into space. And they became one. How about that? So the movie was about exactly what I've been talking about here, that I asked Charles Darwin about, is what about that? Why is there a drive? And we're using reason here. We're using deductive reasoning and even inductive reasoning, but we're using, it's like all of these civilizations from all of these mother rivers, Nile, Indus, Tigris, Euphrates, all this going on, Yellow River, and they all speak to one accord when they want to understand their meaning. They want to understand where they came from and who made them, who designed this situation, who designed them, who designed this world. So we're standing outside of the theater as I close this down. We're standing outside the theater. We're standing out there. And my friend says to me, and this is, I couldn't help but burst out laughing. He says, okay, I have a question. What is the moral of this movie? I'm like, huh? The moral of the movie. Right when we came back out. I'm like, well, obviously he has something to say. So I said, I don't know yet. What do you think the moral of the movie is? And he said to the group of the three of us, he goes, here's what I think. I think the moral of the movie is this. We better be careful what we send out into space, because eventually it may want to come back and sleep with us. And I went, oh, and we all laughed. I go, what a way to put it. How true is that? Hilarious. That was funny. When it's all done and said, we are just like the salmon who drive themselves upstream, just cannot help themselves. They are true to their nature. They haven't been confused because they want to go back. They want to seek their origin, their place of origin. They're driven to go home where they were spawned, where they began. So let's take a lesson, if you don't mind. Soul treasure. Let's take a soul treasure from the road, from Galapagos to Istanbul. With the years you have and the years that I have, let's just continue to go upstream. Let's drive ourselves. Let's let it go. Let your nature, your true nature out. Keep seeking further upstream, further upstream. Keep going further upstream, further upstream. Don't be fearful. And what you'll find is the sweetest, coolest waters ever in the universe. Thank you for listening, and thank you for the smile. Hopefully, you salmon people have a great Thanksgiving. Hope to talk to you in the next few days again, before Thanksgiving. Love ya. Adios.